is an incredible woman of God. She and her husband, Kendall, have been teaching us as a North River staff on this issue of diversity. And so once a month, we are privileged to sit at her feet and learn from her. And she is a woman who speaks with conviction, passion, but over all of that, love and concern for her neighbor. And it's incredible to be able to hear her heart. She's also a professional opera singer. And so she's got some pipes at the same time. And man, it's going to be amazing just to get to learn from her tonight as she's teaching us. We did get a chance to even talk to her, to hear some of her personal story. I mean, it is convicting to hear the things she's gone through and how she has fought to be like Jesus in her life. And it's a true honor to have her here with us tonight. We also got LaToya, who leads the women down there in the South, along with her husband Jordan, sharing with us. We got Kirsty as well, who in the North works with Cody and myself and Lizzie to help shepherd the campus ministry. And they're going to be sharing just different perspectives, some from experiencing racism, some from going up and being indoctrinated in it, and even from ignorance and thinking that everything's fine, but realizing one day that life might not be the way they thought it was. And so I pray that we can listen. I think in some way it's going to speak to all of us. And we're going to understand and be able to relate at least to one person who comes up here. But I hope that we can listen to everybody and seek to understand where everybody is coming from. And to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Okay, guys? But without further ado, I'm going to welcome up Diane Knight.
Hey, how's everybody? Great. All right, so before I get started, I'll tell you a little bit about me. Okay, I became a disciple April 5th, 1989. Wow. Some of you were not born. Probably all of you were not born then. I became a disciple in New York City, and it was while I was pursuing my career as an opera singer, and I studied with what was known at that time was the daytime ministry. And that's because most of us worked in the evenings, so then we would have our midweek services during the day, and our Bible talks during the day. And then we would meet on Sundays with everyone else. But that's where I became a disciple, and I guess for me, the last time I was where you all were, I went to University of Miami. That's where I got my bachelor's degree in vocal performance. And then I went from there to Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. And that's where I got my master's degree in vocal performance. And then I also did an artist diploma in opera program there. And I left from there. Then when I traveled to Europe, and I spent the summer studying in Graz, Austria, preparing to audition for agents and that sort of thing. And then moved to New York, and at the time I was married to a jazz musician, actually, and we moved to New York to pursue our careers, and he ended up playing with Ray Charles, and if any of you saw the movie Ray, he thought he could imitate, Ray's life, family at home, ladies out on the tour, and it was like, no, that's not gonna happen, okay? So, unfortunately, that marriage ended, and fortunately for me, I was able to meet Kendall.
Oh, let's go, Coach A.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. We were able to begin to work together in the ministry in Brooklyn. And then, as they say, the rest is history. And we got married in 1995. So December's going to make 23 years. Some of you know my husband, Kendall. Wow. Mortgage banker, football coach extraordinaire, preacher, all that good stuff. But that's a little bit about me. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to find out, I'm just going to do 3 sections, okay? And I want someone to tell me, what did you get out of the session last Friday? We'll go with the first hand. Start over here. Okay. Go, yes.
Yeah, I got, oh wow, that I just need to love people more. And meet the needs that, necessarily when I get into a situation where I feel, oh, this person is totally ignorant into how I live my life or how other people live their lives. It's just like, no, this isn't a moment to make them feel less than me or anything else because they didn't have my experience. This is my opportunity to love them and meet their needs and meet where they're lacking because I expect them to do the same for me if I wasn't, acting right. So.
That's good. What about the center? Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I'm someone who has worked through some stereotypes and even still has some stereotypes. And even in sharing as a small group, I was surprised that had stereotypes about what people were going to share, and then even being surprised when they didn't share what I expected from them. And so I feel like I'm just learning a lot about to not expect certain things and to just look at people as opposed to what I'm assuming.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I learned that I still have a lot of racially charged fears and insecurities, and learning how to admit that and be open with it.
Awesome. Wonderful. That's great. Well, we're going to try to build tonight, okay, on you all having the knowledge, the tools, the convictions from the scriptures, even from science, okay, to help us to combat the lie, right? And because that's what this is all about. We know that when you look over in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, it says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness." And then goes down a little bit further. It says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." Now, this passage in Genesis you're probably very familiar with. And this passage basically is helping us to understand the doctrine of Imago Dei. And basically, all that means is that what? We're all made in whose image? God's image, right? That is the truth, right? That's the truth. And if you take a look at this first slide, if you can pull up slide number 1 for me. Even science has come to acknowledge the truth of Imago Dei. And so this says skin deep. What is race exactly? Science tells us there is no genetic or scientific basis for it. Instead, it's largely a made-up label. And the label was made up to define us and to separate us. Now, whose scheme does that sound like? Satan, exactly. Satan's all about what? Dividing, right? Divide and conquer, right? Dividing us. And so I want to share a little bit from you. I'm sure those of you all are all computer savvy. I'm a baby boomer, but I'm learning. This was an incredible issue, National Geographic issue. I'm sure you can pull it up online. It's full of a lot of amazing articles. But I'm going to share a little bit from this article, okay? All right. So, before I go there, there's another book called White Awake, okay? And all of these books, Jordan said that he would send out, okay, to you. There's a bibliography of books, of articles, of videos, and that sort of thing that you can, in your own time, go, read, watch, so you can absorb a lot of this material. Because I'm going to go through a lot of it really fast tonight, because I know we don't have as much time. But I do want to share this with you. And from the book in Wide Awake, it says, in Scripture, the Imago Dei is applied exclusively to humans, highlighting the unique qualities with which we have been divinely endowed. Therefore, it is the first signpost of the good news of the gospel in the biblical account. It affirms that human beings are good, are of infinite value, and are a reflection in the character of the triune God. Simply stated, the Imago Dei declares that all human beings are valuable and of infinite worth. God is the one that makes this declaration, and no human being is allowed to challenge it. To do so is to play God. Yet when we created the American construct of race, that's exactly what we did. We undercut the Imago Dei by establishing the narrative of racial difference. So now you may be saying, the narrative of racial difference, okay, well, what's that all about? And I think it's important to understand some of the science. Like, how did this whole thing start? Okay? If the truth is Imago Dei, right? If the truth is what? All of these beautiful faces, all of you all, we're all created in God's image. Where did all this come from? How did all this division and, separating people out by, quote, race, how did that start, right? It's important. So in the first half of the 19th century, I'm going to share some of this, one of America's most prominent scientists was a doctor named Samuel Morton. Morton lived in Philadelphia, and he collected skulls. Here are some of the skulls he collected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know that's a little bit morbid, right? Okay, so Morton believed that people could be divided into 5 races, that these represented separate acts of creation. Okay, so see right there, is that true? No, that's a lie. Okay, the races had distinct characters which corresponded to their place in a divinely determined hierarchy. Morton's craniometry he claimed that whites or Caucasians were the most intelligent of the races. East Asians, Morton used the term Mongolian, though ingenious and susceptible of cultivation, were one step down. Next came Southeast Asians, followed by Native Americans. Blacks or Ethiopians were at the bottom. In the decades before the Civil War, Morton's ideas were quickly taken up by the defenders of slavery. Today, Morton is known as the father of scientific racism. So many of the horrors of the past few centuries can be traced to the idea that one race is inferior to another. That a tour of his collection is a haunting experience to an uncomfortable degree. We still live with Morton's legacy. Racial distinctions continue to shape our politics, our neighborhoods, and our sense of self. This is the case even though what science actually has to tell us about race is just the opposite of what Morton contended. Morton thought he'd identified immutable and inherited differences among people, but at the same time he was working, shortly before Charles Darwin put forth his theory of evolution and long before the discovery of DNA, scientists had no idea how traits were passed on. Researchers who have since looked at people at the genetic level now say that the whole category of race is misconceived. Mm-hmm. Think about what you just heard. How many of us have literally, all of us, right, been indoctrinated to believe what? That there are different races. Mm-hmm. That's a lie. We're all created in God's image. Now you got to wrap your mind around it. You kind of go, well, wait a minute, we look different. Okay, so what's up? Yes, different ethnicities, right? We're going to take a look at just some of the, the migration from where mankind was created and just the movement, right, across the planet. So yes, we look different. We have different skin color, melanin, all that kind of stuff, right? Amount in our skin. But there's no such thing as race. And that's a hard thing to kind of step back, right? And to not buy into that lie anymore. Yeah. But it's going to take a lot, I think. You're going to have to, dive into the scriptures, get your convictions from the word, but also educate yourself so that you are solid in your conviction, right? And then that way, you can step out and love people the way God wants you to love them, right? And it says here that in June 2000, the results from this genetic study at a White House ceremony, Craig Venter, a pioneer of DNA sequencing, observed the concept of race has no genetic or scientific basis. Over the past few decades, genetic research has revealed 2 deep truths about people. The first is that all humans are closely related. And it goes on, it says that everyone has the same collection of genes, but with the exception of identical twins, everyone has slightly different versions of some of them. Studies of this genetic diversity have allowed scientists to reconstruct a kind of family tree of human populations that has revealed the second deep truth. In a very real sense, all people alive today are Africans. Whoa, okay. Second slide. Okay, so in this slide, you see, right, the migration of people from what? The continent of Africa. Isn't that amazing? Now, I can't go into all of the details of that, okay? So I do want you to try to see if you can go online, get the issue, do a little bit more reading yourself. But it is amazing to see that science, right, pretty much agrees with what you see in the scriptures. Yeah. God created male and female, right? And then male and female had to move out of the Garden of Eden. So they started to migrate and they started to move. Now, the Bible itself, what? It's not a science book, but it there's science in there. It's not a history book, but what? We get some history in there. It doesn't show us all the migration patterns of, all the people, but you see how the whole thing transpired. And I think should be so awesome for you is that you can see now that science is actually catching up to the scriptures. And I think that's where you can get your confidence from, to know that you do not have to buy into the garbage that you see around you. Our response as disciples, if you look over in Ephesians chapter 6, okay, verses 10 to 11. I know you probably know this passage, but I think it's important for us to understand what the battle and who the battle is with. Everybody there? Ephesians 6? Okay. Verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. I'm glad that someone shared earlier that one of the things that they got out of last week was to love people more. Because I think it's really, really important that all of us understand, okay, no matter what ethnicity, what culture we come from, that your battle is not, okay, with that human being that may be getting on your nerves because, okay, they're a little ignorant and they don't quite know what you know. All right? This is a spiritual battle. So I think if you can get that deep, 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 deep down in your heart, then that way you can love people more. You can develop the compassion, right, to help bring them along to what is true as opposed to what is false. Remember, you're battling the truth of Imago Dei versus what? The narrative of racial difference. We're all created in God's image. There is definitely the sin of racism, right? We see it around us. And a lot of times people will have different definitions of words, but I think if you can just understand that you're dealing with a system of oppression of one ethnic group over another. It's sort of a combination of power and prejudice. We can all be prejudiced. We can all be bigoted, okay? But in order for racism to be a part of the equation, there has to be a certain amount of what? Power that you can put into action, right? All of your prejudicial and bigoted ideas, okay? And so I think that's really, really important to understand, but understand this. It's just sin. It's just sin. And so if you can separate that out, you can love the person and to help bring them along so that they can then understand what the truth is. And then that's where you can create all of that unity. Let me give you a little bit. Some of this, you can see a little bit how it has infected our social systems. And I'm going to share a little bit of this with you. Okay. This is from Wide Awake. Okay. It says here, when left unchallenged, the narrative of racial difference inflicts catastrophic damage on every level of society, starting at an individual level, moving into communities of people before infecting the roots of our social systems. We need a transformed vision that recognizes the narrative at each level, but we especially need to learn to see the impact of the narrative on our social systems. A social system is made up of the elements that work together in towns and cities, such as schools, police departments, businesses, manufacturing, hospitals, grocery stores, housing, and other entities. Though these entities provide services or play certain roles, they also form what is often called a social system. Each element within a social system is supposed to serve people of all backgrounds equally, regardless of race or any other social marker. But the narrative of racial difference prevents that because it is built around a calculation of human value based on race, which reproduces what? Inequalities. And the reason that I'm sharing a lot of these details with you, because I want you to see just how insidious sin is, okay? And how if we don't attack it at its root, how it spreads and the infection that happens, right, in our society as a result of it. You can pull up slides 3 and 4 for me. You see that? Okay. You know, I don't know about you, but there are times when I've had different discussions with people, and they may say, well, you know, so why is it that, you know, in this community, you know, this group of people, they're able to do A, B, C, D, E. And then this group of people, you know, they just can't seem to get their act together, right? And I think it's very, very important. If you take a look at this, it says lifetime of inequality. Race and ethnicity can shape a person's life from beginning to end. In the U.S., disparities in health, wealth, and access to education among the 4 major demographic groups, Asian, white, Hispanic, and black, persists and can be compounded over time. For example, blacks and Hispanics earn less than whites and Asians. Low wages often make it harder to finance a child's education. For people without a college degree, upward mobility can be particularly difficult to achieve. Now, if you think back about the history of America, right? How it all started, right? It's almost akin to, how many of you know the game, the Monopoly game? You know, right? So what happens at the beginning of the game, Monopoly game? Everybody gets what? 200, right? Everybody gets $200, right? Okay. So what would happen, right? There are 4 players, right, in the game. So what would happen if one player got no money, but everybody else got 200? And they were like, okay, let's go. Let's start the game, right? Now, nobody, you know, everybody believes that everybody got 200. But, you know, the 4th player kind of looked under the board and was like, well, where's my money? No money. What's going to happen to that player as they're playing the game? What's going to happen? Huh? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Yes.
They're going to lose.
You say they're going to lose. Okay? So you're saying what? They can never catch up, right? Okay, yes. What's going to happen?
Somebody's going to buy a property, and they're going to pass it, and they got to pay rent, and they can't pay rent.
Wow.
They're going to jail.
Wow. Oh, yes.
Everybody,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's real deep.
Okay. So we can hear.
I was
Yes.
gonna say everybody's gonna look at him like, "What are you doing? Like, come on, catch up." Everybody's like, "Oh, he's bad at this game now."
Right.
They're gonna
Right.
sue
What's
him.
wrong with him,
Yeah,
right?
Just because he's down.
Right. Yes.
The one who doesn't have anybody to be with and everybody else, they feel like they need to do all that they can do to get that money to do the conversation.
Wow. So it can create what? Some feelings like, okay, I don't have any money. You have money, so I'm going to do what I can do to get some real money. Okay, because otherwise, what happens? Then that kind of survival instinct kicks in, right? Yes, in the back. Yeah. I didn't hear you.
Learned helplessness.
Wow. Learned helplessness. Yes.
They can become like very bitter and like, what's wrong with you? Like, they can already have like the seed of like, I hate you already. You didn't do
Yes.
anything against them.
Right.
Because they've dealt with it.
Right. Because I mean, the other players, was like, well, I didn't not give them $200. It's like I have my $200, so I'm good, right? Yes.
They're gonna become irritated and like not want to play the game anymore because it's not fair.
Wow. But can you do that in life? Can you just say, I'm done? I'm not playing the game of life anymore, right? You can't do that, right? So look at that chart. If you can see it up here. Look at the chart. Now, I've had conversations with people that say, okay, well, why is it that the risk infancy for blacks is way higher than Asian, whites, and Hispanics? Why do you think that is? What would lead to that? When you think about what we just finished talking about, right? The narrative of racial difference, and that it's systemic. It's in every part of our social system, right? Our schools, our hospitals, our grocery stores. So if that narrative of racial difference, that sort of inequality, that starting with no money, what is that going to lead to? Yes.
a miseducation or not being able to afford proper preventative.
Exactly. And so then you get what? That high risk infancy. Living without insurance. A lot of people, what? Can't afford insurance. And once again, you look on the chart, you'll see that with Hispanic and blacks, and in this case, that's higher among the Hispanic community. And then you go down to health struggles. And what you'll notice in all of these, challenging childhood, earnings gap, renting versus owning, graduation gap, uneven employment, unequal retirement, desperate lifespans, degrees for some. It's really interesting because sometimes people will say, well, you know what? Maybe they just need to work harder. They're lazy. You know, they need to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. What if you don't have any boots? Right? So you go back to that game again, right? And so it's really important that we stop and we really think about, like the young man was saying, it was like, what stereotypes do we have? Do we buy into? You know, what lies have we kind of just absorbed and taken in? When in reality, we know that the system, has not been equal. It was never equal. Right? And you know, it's really interesting to understand that, especially here in America, it was all about economics. Whatever is going to allow the country to be able to succeed and profit. And unfortunately, they used people. Indentured servants in the beginning, and then immigrants that would come from different countries, right? Who were treated horribly. And then once they came and they assimilated, but they were able to take on the label of whiteness, then what had to happen with all of the immigrants, the people that were brought in from Africa, right? They had to be put at the bottom of the totem pole. They had to be placed, they had to be labeled as inferior, because that would have been the only way for them to continue to succeed. And so I think it's important, the next slide, if you take a look at it, put that up for me. When you look at the timeline, what do you see there? In this timeline, what do you see? What do you see? Anybody? Yes.
The same thing, but it's a different name.
Okay, different name. What else? Well, what do you notice specifically about that timeline? Yes.
Free is in quotation marks.
Yeah, free is in quotation marks. True. Yeah. And what? Yes.
The time that African Americans have been set free in this country of America is 5 times shorter than the time that they were in bondage.
Exactly. And so once again, what you're seeing here is kind of like a picture of the Monopoly game. Right? So so let's go. Why haven't you caught up? Why are you still behind in all of these areas? Right? You see what I'm saying? And so what I'm trying to help you to understand is it's so important to be educated. It's so important to have the knowledge and the truth of what's going on, so that all of these tools, this is not to help create, guilt or to put you down, or just like, okay, so we're just going to be mad at all the white people, because, they kind of, they've had this advantage and blah, 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 blah. Because the truth of the matter is a lot of it's class. A lot of it's socioeconomic. Just because, your skin may be lighter than mine, you may have had it just as rough. Right? But I think it's important for you to be equipped with the knowledge that helps you to fight, once again, the lie, right? Because that's what this is all about tonight, okay? I want you to understand that when we are armed with the truth, then we can fight the battle. Because that's what we're here to do. And I want you all to know is that I'm incredibly encouraged by all of you all, okay? I just turned 60 in August, so, it's been a long time since I've been you all day. But I will tell you this, okay? I am confident that you all are going to literally change the world. You're going to turn the world upside down in your generation, because you have so much more than what I had growing up. But I was still able to move forward, to be successful, because I set my mind. And thank goodness I became a disciple. And so as a result of that, even with all the different experiences that I grew up, things that were negative, and that happened to me because my skin color was darker, okay, because of God, because of God's grace, then I was able to let go of bitterness. I was able to forgive. I was able to understand that ultimately, right, Satan's scheme was to try to get us at each other's throats. All the while, not wanting us to know what the truth is. And the truth is, we can celebrate each other's diversity of our ethnicity. And our ethnicity, you know, based on our language, our history, our ancestry, our national customs, our cuisine, our art. You know, we do come from all different cultures. Yeah. But we are all created in the image of God. Yeah. And I just want to encourage you that as you all, if you're studying the Bible, keep studying the Bible. Okay? The truth is in the scriptures. Yeah. All right? And just know, okay, that everything that you're learning in school, okay, can be used to help undergird everything that you're learning about who you are in God's eyes. And you're going to be able to take that and fight that battle. Amen? Amen. Amen. So you are going to, thank you, you're going to be hearing some pretty vulnerable stuff tonight. And so I just want to make sure that you can open up your heart and be sensitive, compassionate, as the young men and women that are going to come up after me share some of their experiences and some of the things that they've gone through. But because they are disciples of Jesus, they've been able to combat the lie. Amen.
Okay, thank you so much, Diane. Let's give it up again for Diane. Thank you. So, hey guys, what are we trying to do? Just cut it down to the basis. We're all trying to get back to we're made in the image of God. And Bob talked about last week. I do want to remind us, because this can spark a lot of feelings and emotions and things from our past in our minds, what we're not trying to do, okay? What are we not trying to do? We're not trying to have a political agenda. That's not what we're doing. We're not trying to make one race feel, even though it's a social construct, which we just learned, but we're not trying to make one race feel bad about themselves or guilt trip themselves, and we're not trying to make another race feel victimized. We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to make this the number one thing we talk about in church. Because Jesus should be the number one thing we talk about in church. It's just a part of our discipleship. This is a part of us following Jesus, but it's just a part of the whole. And so as we continue to talk about this, we want to make sure that we're focused on what we're not trying to do, just as much as we're focused on what we are trying to do. But we are going to have some of us share. You know, some of us staff, so I'm going to share, and LaToya, my wife, is going to share, and then Kirsty's going to share. And Cody really wishes he's going to be here. He is in bed sick. I think I gave it to him. And he really pushed through. I think he had a couple times with some of you guys today, and now he can't be here tonight. So I think, like, Jordan Genovese, it's your fault for hanging out with him today. So let him rest. But we're just going to share a little bit about our backgrounds. And what we're really going to do is share our conversions, and not our conversion stories when we found Christ, but even as disciples, how we had to learn to treat other people justly and treat other people with imago Dei, with viewing other people in the image of God. And so I'm going to start out with myself, but I'm going to say a quick prayer, and then we're going to jump on in. Here we go. Father God, I pray that as Toya and Kirsty and I share our stories today, and afterwards we go to share our stories with one another, God, I pray that we can be vulnerable and real and honest with our backgrounds, and not to be ashamed with who we are, but to learn how to grow to become more like Christ. And God, I pray you speak through LaToya, Kirsty, and I. And God, I know we all come from so many different places, but help us to unite in you. Help us to unite knowing that you made us all in the image of yourself, in the image of God. We love you, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So I was born and raised in Atlanta, and you know, from the you know what I'm saying? And but I kind of grew up originally like through some of my elementary school years in East Point, which is like 95% black. And I went to a very diverse church. And so I grew up with black babysitters, like hanging out with black kids all the time. And then I moved from there to a couple different places, and we landed in Peachtree City. Peachtree City, some of us know, is 95% white. And we got golf carts, and it's awesome. And not the white, but okay, you got what I'm saying. But even when I get there, and it kind of switched my whole mindset. And But very quickly, I started finding myself, because I was a basketball player. Some of you guys don't know how I jam on the court, man. You know, but all my idols were elite basketball players that were black. So like, I love Michael. You guys don't even remember watching Michael Jordan. I remember watching MJ. Okay, you don't remember that. Not as a Wizard. Exactly. As a Bulldog. Even though JK's wearing a Jordan Tech hoodie, let's go. Let's go, Jazz. Come on, it's awesome. Can I transfer, bro? Anyway, so I very much idolized black culture. Like, I wanted to be like these black athletes that I always watched on TV. And so I tried to get to know them. Like, I read MJ's biography, like all this kind of stuff, where I was just in it. And then Kobe came along and LeBron. I was getting their shoes, rocking my Air Force Ones. Like, I was just kind of, that was my mindset. And so I wanted to dress like them too. So I sagged my pants real low. Like, I got like a long yut in my white tee. Like, that's kind of my life. You know what I'm saying? And I just love that culture. And that was just kind of me. Like, and I grew up in this idea where like my best friends were black. I had white and black best friends. That like I dated white and black girls. Like I thought I knew both sides. And I always thought that like I was a chameleon. Like, I could go anywhere at any time. And I was proud of myself in that. But what started happening was I started to be too, like, quote unquote, black for all the preppy white kids. And I started to be too white to hang out always with the black kids. And so I would start having the black kids make fun of me about being too white. And why are you, like, sometimes I would love it. Like, on the basketball court, they would call me white chocolate. And I thought that was cool. But then other times they would make fun of me, you know what I mean? And then I got made fun of by the white kids because I dressed too black, and I would get made fun of that way. And so I started feeling just kind of just out of place. Like, just completely, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with myself. But this whole time I thought I understood both sides. Like, I thought I knew, like, I thought I had my black card. Like, I thought just all that kind of stuff. Like, I thought I knew what was going on. And so fast forward from there into college. And I really felt like I understood black people. I really thought like I knew what was going on and that I was a bridge. And yet I was so ignorant. And I didn't start waking up to that until after I became a Christian and started following Jesus. So a couple black guys helped me become Christians, helped me, either became my roommates, they became my best friends, they ended up being some of my best men in my wedding, all this kind of stuff. And I started saying things, and for the first time ever, my friends that were black instead of white would pull me aside and start teaching me about what was I was supposed to say and what was I not supposed to say. And I would just say these stupidest things in front of everyone. Like, I just started generating this vocabulary where I thought, well, if a black person said it, I could say it. I thought even things black people didn't say, I thought I could say. Like, and I kind of would always put my foot in my mouth. I'll never forget the first time that I figured out what braids are or what weave is. I had no clue. And then one of the girls at church in the campus ministry had really short hair. And then the next Friday she had really long hair. And I was baffled. Like, what happened? And she told me she sewed it in. I said, you're lying. Like, I just had no clue what was going on. She literally showed me, like, come here. You know what I mean? Just like showed me. And there were several instances like that where I would say something. That's more funny, but I would say stuff that was more like really hurtful. And then, but these guys that cared about me enough, they wouldn't yell at me or start getting mad at me or say something stupid to me or fight, but they would put their arm around me, pull me aside, and do you realize what you just said? And I'm like, no, like I said this, what's wrong with that? And then they would help me, you know what I mean, and really love me. And that was the first time my eyes started to get opened up to realize how ignorant I really was. And then fast forward from there, I started dating Toya. And my wife's going to share next. If you don't know Toya, she's black. I'm white, if you couldn't tell. And we got married 3 years ago. And that was when my world kind of got shattered. And even though like I always felt comfortable with both cultures, I had to really consider, well, I'm about to marry a woman that's not my color. I remember asking my parents if they were okay with that. I'm like, hey, how would you feel if I married a black woman? And they felt great about it, praise God. But even though I'd grown up in it, it was weird to imagine myself going forever like that. And then I'll never forget, it was a couple months into our marriage, and it was the first time I really paid attention to one of the shootings where a cop killed a black man. And we heard about it, man, we saw it on the news, and I literally didn't think anything of it. Like, all the same old excuses started rolling through my mind. Well, there's we don't hear the whole story. He must have done something we're not hearing about. Well, the guy should just put his hands out the window. What's the big deal? Like, there's kind of all those excuses flowing through my head, not wanting to admit what it really was and the trends that were happening. And so I kind of brushed it off. And then later that night, Toya was crying. And I was like, why are you crying? Like, I literally had no clue. I didn't say it like that. But I asked her, and she started sharing how scared she was for her brothers. She has 2 large black brothers, and they were now my brothers also. And I was baffled, honestly, because they were both disciples. They're both really respectable men. They both have great careers. They dress well. Like, they're both incredible charactered men. And I was like, why would you ever be scared for a high-quality man like that to ever be shot by a cop? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Showing my ignorance of assuming these men that were shot were not high-quality, kind of high-character men. And she started sharing of how it doesn't matter what kind of people they are, but because the cop sometimes only sees the color of the skin. And how they both have gotten profiled like that, and one of them even gotten arrested for no reason and gotten the charge canceled later just because of the color of his skin. And how terrified she was that her brothers, now my brothers, would get shot just because of the color of their skin. And my world fell apart in that moment. I had no idea how to take care of my wife. I had no idea how to comfort her. Because something that I never thought was true was suddenly true in my marriage. And so I had to very quickly learn that ignorance is not bliss. And ignorance just isn't reality. And I had to just fight and gain understanding and apologize to her for my own excuses and really start to fight to understand this reality that was going on that I try to stay so far away from. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, go Jordan.
So, in the second, so that sent me down a really big route of searching for understanding. The second one that really popped my bubble was when we got pregnant. And I won't go deep into it, but I'm going to have a black son. He's going to be mixed. Toya's going to have a white son. And just this concept of he will go through life in a way that I didn't. And he will go through things and experience things that I didn't have to experience. And so now I'm starting to go, I got to figure out as much as I can to raise my son in a way where he doesn't feel the prejudice, at least from his parents. And where he can feel so safe at home. And he can feel, I'm proud of my white dad and I'm proud of my black mom. I'm proud of both. I'm proud that I am both. Instead of feeling like he has to be more one or the other. And that just popped my bubble so much more. And it helped me realize a couple of things. I share all my story, and I hope the things we can get out of it. Because I'm still searching for understanding. I'm still learning so much. And I feel like I have learned a lot. Like, I have learned so much about my wife's hair. Like, I just know so much. I could write a book on black hair for white people, not for black people, but for white people. I could really help you out. And I've just done it all. I've done all the wrong things. You know what I'm saying? And I put my foot in my mouth so many times. But I've finally come to a place of realizing I don't get it. And no matter how many, and the things that I hope we can take away, one of the biggest things I had to realize, no matter how many best black friends I had, no matter how many babysitters that were black that I had, no matter my wife is black, doesn't mean that I get it. And I still have to fight for understanding. And I think that goes for both sides. And if you're black, doesn't matter how many white best friends you have, or if you're Asian or you're Hispanic, we don't get each other right off the bat. Just because we're sitting next to each other in church. Now that's a huge success. Because church can be so racist nowadays. We can sit next to each other, doesn't mean we understand each other. And I learned to really start fighting for understanding. Off of that, I realized that ignorance causes racism. And my ignorance of not understanding black culture and not understanding black people caused me to have prejudices in my mind. It caused me to have thoughts in my mind that were there. And I had to learn to deal with and to bring up and to talk to people about. And I think that's on both sides. That ignorance on both sides of one another causes racism. We can't let ignorance be bliss anymore, guys. When we decided to become Christians, we decided we're going after all nations. And we're going to decide to love like Christ loved, not how we love. How do we love? We do a really good job at loving people that are just like us. We do really good, because we're really good at loving ourselves. So we do really good at loving people just like us. We're bad. I'm bad. I love people that aren't like me. And so I had to learn to say, man, to love you, I got to get to know you more and to fight past ignorance. The other thing I had to learn was to be confident in who I am. Like, I didn't, for a long time, I didn't feel really amidst in the struggles. Like, I actually a lot of times like hanging out with black people more than hanging out with white people. I thought white people were boring for a long time. Like, that was my mindset. White people were pretty bad at basketball. So you know what I'm saying? So none of you guys must not know what I'm saying. But those were some of the stereotypes that would kind of go in my mind, clearly, right? Even though I thought I was better than a lot of people at basketball. But I had to learn to be confident in who I was. I think for a lot of us, we're white and we kind of feel a little more like we affiliate more with black people. We're black. We feel like we affiliate more with white people. We're Hispanic and feel like another, or Asian feel like another one. Be confident in who you are. Just because you don't have to just because you're not who the world expects you to be doesn't mean you're not who God expects you to be. So be confident in who you are. Just because you're not like the other person that looks like you doesn't mean you're messed up. Doesn't mean you're broken. The last thing that I hope you really get from my story I was so grateful for was I was so grateful for Brad and how many times he put his arm around me and taught me in a loving way what I was saying was stupid. But I was so grateful. And he taught me in a loving way, in a gracious way, and I kept on putting my foot in my mouth, and even if I said it to him, he wouldn't just, in rage of like come back at me, but he would teach me how that made him feel. And I learned to see how what I said and how it affected people's feelings. And so I want us to be that for each other. And we're going to, as we're learning to talk about race, we're all going to say stupid stuff. We're all going to say things that we don't know we're talking about. Last week, Adoy talked about not walking on eggshells. We're all going to say things that are slightly offensive, that are kind of weird, that we don't know what we're talking about, because we're trying to figure out how to talk about it for the first time. So instead of getting mad at each other, be the friends, be the Christ disciples that put your arm around each other and lovingly talk about how that made you feel. And lovingly talk it through so that we can all learn how to better represent Christ. Amen? Amen. Amen. Thanks for listening. Latoya's going to come up and share now.
What's up, y'all? Hey. So I just want to say my heart's beating really, really fast because this is really hard to do. And it's hard to watch my husband get up here and share honestly about where he comes from. So I think in my mind I can feel a little judged. Like, you married a guy who doesn't know about black hair. Like, I don't know. So I'm just saying the way that we're asking you to break up in small groups and have conversations and be real and be honest with each other, we're doing it too, and it's really scary and it's really hard. But we're doing it in front of 200 of you guys. And so be patient with us. Don't judge me. I won't judge you. So kind of my own racial, I don't want to use the word race anymore. I feel like now when I see the box race, I'm going to be like, that's not real. So my ethnical conversion story, I don't even know how to call it anymore. So I grew up in California. I was raised in San Jose, California. West Side. And one thing that, a term that I learned in diversity training that the Knights teach us is like dominant culture and non-dominant. Dominant culture and non-dominant culture. And so in San Jose, California, as a black girl, I was a minority in the dominant culture. Most people were either white or Hispanic. And so I was not the normal in the dominant culture. So my hair was different, my body type was different, my name was different. I used to hate my name, literally. I hated my name to the point where I wanted to go by my middle name, which is Desiree, because it sounded more Hispanic to me. I don't know, that could be wrong, but to me, as a girl in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, I was like, Latoya just is so ghetto. I want to say I'm Desiree, but then I go to the new school and I get nervous and I introduce myself as Latoya and be like, I forgot to say I'm Desiree. So that was the struggle. I hated my name. And at that stage, in those formative years, I learned really quickly that boys didn't like me. They liked the Hispanic girls or they liked the white girls. They were really thin, they had really long, straight hair. I was not that at all. And so really quickly I realized I'm not normal. I need to do whatever I can to be normal. And I adapted, and I don't even know if it's adapted because I was a blank slate, I was a child, but I learned very quickly how to thrive, if you will, in the dominant culture. So that was up until 8th grade, and then in 8th grade, I moved to Clayton County. Let's go, Clayton County! So you know anything about Clayton County, that's the opposite. So as a girl named Latoya, I became part of the majority culture. And I think a lot of times we can, again, focus on race, but there's cultural things that happen. And immediately I became part of the dominant culture, and I became like, I know we have the phrase white privilege a lot. In a black community, when you're black and you kind of can fit in, that's a black privilege. Like white people in Clayton County didn't fit in now, that Asian people in Clayton County didn't really, and so it's really, I became someone who now fit in for the first time. And I was the majority culture immediately. So it was the first time my hair was given value instead of people just asking me questions about it. People actually liked it and could talk about it. Everything about who I was became normal. And so I didn't have to think as hard. I didn't have to try to fit in over time. But at first it was like, oh, you talk like a Valley girl. You say like all the time. You know, like everything that I did in Clayton County at first was not acceptable. And so I really quickly learned, don't do that. You're not going to thrive here. And so there's lots of, I became this new normal in this dominant culture. And in a lot of ways, it was hurtful because it could have hurtful times because people just assumed, oh, you're light skinned, you have good hair. That's a whole nother topic. You're light skinned, you have good hair. What are you mixed with? That was the question. It wasn't even are you mixed. It's what are you mixed with? I'm like, my mom is black and my dad is black. I'm mixed with black and black. So that's what I'm mixed with. That's all I got. But I had to answer that question more often than I would have liked to. And so from 8th grade to moving to Georgia State, which even though Georgia State on paper is a very diverse school, it's basically a public HBCU. And so it's really easy to be part of the majority culture at Georgia State. So I mastered this new culture. I mean, I thrived in it. It was everything that I wanted to be, I was able to be. And for a while in my junior year of college, I remember going through a pretty rough kind of like identity crisis, if you will, feeling like, which girl am I? Am I the girl from California who genuinely loves Christina Aguilera? Or am I the girl from Clayton County who genuinely knows every lyric to T.I.'s song? Like, I love Paper Trail. So how in the world am I supposed to make sense of that, you know? And I felt fake. I felt really confused. I felt like I had to choose which culture was I going to actually be or identify with, and which culture did the world think I was supposed to be? Because I got a lot of different messages. I struggled a lot with body image issues because I compared myself to everything that wasn't normal to me, feeling like I needed to really become whatever it was. So that's a whole nother conversation. But in 2009, as a senior at Georgia State, I became a disciple. Amen. I became a disciple at The Path, which is a sister church in East Point. And it's a majority African American congregation. Now, the girl who invited me out, she's white. Her name is Amy. One of my best friends ended up being my maid of honor. Her name is Shira, Stacy's sister. Yes. She's Stacy's sister, so she's white. So I had those. It wasn't just all black, but it definitely was majority African American. And so I thrived there because now I was a disciple. I had my new identity in Christ. I wasn't in sin anymore. I was changing. Everything was growing. And I could make a T.I. reference and people wouldn't think I was crazy. So this is like perfect. Like I felt like it was so easy to thrive there, whether it was the music, the atmosphere. I related to people and their stories a whole lot more. There was like 5 girls there named Latoya. I was like, wow. Like the Latoya ministry. This is like awesome. So it was really easy to feel safe. It was really easy to feel at home. I love what Jordan said at the end. You know, we're good at loving people who are like us because we love ourselves. And so I really didn't have to try. You know what I mean? I really didn't have to fight for it. It didn't challenge me in a lot of ways to have conversations like this. And then in 2015, I moved to North River because I wanted to marry Jordan Massey. Hey, man. And that's why I came. And it has grown in diversity since then. But as soon as I got to North River, I did not want to come to North River. As soon as I got to North River, I remember feeling like I was picked up. And even though I was an older girl, I was tossed back into that 6th grade body in California trying to figure out who am I supposed to be? Like, which person am I supposed to be? Because the people that I was around, majority at North River were white women, and very few Hispanics actually, basically just all white women. And I've actually mentioned this in a couple of Bible studies with some of the girls in the South when we talk about our sin and we confess that the group, you know how we all have that group of people that we feel the most insecure around? My population is white women. I naturally, 100% of the time, if I'm in a group of people where I'm the only, well, specifically women, when I'm the only black girl and it's white women, I feel very, very insecure. And I have to fight really, really hard to be confident. I have to fight really, really hard to be myself. I have to fight really, really hard to be. And white women, you're great. It's not your fault. You guys are awesome. But I think it's just, it brings me back to 6th grade. It brings me back to 5th grade. And I never, once I got to Clayton County, Georgia State, the path, I never had to figure that out again. And for the first time in 2015, God's like, let's figure it out. And so it was hard, and I was surrounded by everything that made me insecure. I was new, which obviously is the new kid at school, you always feel out of place, and I was scared. And so I started to make little subtle changes. I didn't wear my Jordans as often. I started struggling a whole lot more with body issues. They came back really, really hard. I didn't feel safe, but I was a leader, so I had to get it together really quickly. I had to get it together really quickly means I failed. I'm getting it together really quickly. I cry a lot before staff meetings sometimes because I knew I was going to be the only black person in that circle. I distrusted anyone. I don't know if a lot of you guys know Jasmine Jackson, but every time someone would be like, when I was near North River, they'd be like, oh, you should get to know Jasmine. My first thought is it because she's the only girl my age who's black? Like, why are you suggesting her over and over and over? And so Jasmine's awesome. We're friends. We're great. Shout out to Jazz. But when I first got here, I got so irritated with people saying, do you know Jasmine? I'm like, oh, the one other black girl here? Yeah, I know her. It was hard. Those were the thoughts that I had. And I did not trust Kelly. I did not want to be discipled by Kelly. And Kelly and I have done a lesson on this. This is not, I'm just like doing all my disclaimers because this is not gossip. But Kelly and I have worked it out, but I didn't trust Kelly. I didn't want to trust Kelly. I didn't want to get to know Kelly. I didn't want to give her my heart, but she was discipling me. So Thursday mornings were the worst because I was going to Kelly's house every Thursday morning and not wanting to give my heart. I was too scared to. So at 25 years old, 6 years old spiritually and married, I was back at fighting for my life spiritually because there was an internal battle, and I was not thriving here. I was not thriving when I first got to North River. I didn't feel at home. I didn't feel safe, and I felt like and no one said this, but I felt like the only version of me that was acceptable here was the California version. And so I had I just started fighting really hard to be that girl. I didn't think I could be the full me. And so there were comments that hurt. There were things that were said that really bothered me, and I think thank God I was a disciple for 6 years and had a lot of scripture and Bible and prayer and conviction and a husband who held me accountable. Like there was a lot of things that helped me not fall off the deep end in this struggle, but it was a struggle. I had questions that offended me, and I just I would just be like, okay. I don't even know what I would do, but they were sincere. They're people who kind of like Jordan, put their foot in their mouth a little bit, but I wasn't safe enough to be that person to wrap my arm around them yet and say, hey, that really hurt me. Like when you said that, it really rubbed me the wrong way, and here's a couple reasons why. So I would laugh a lot, but I also hurt a lot. Yeah. And I want to read this scripture in James chapter 3, if you want to turn there. I'm going to read the NIV version. James chapter 3, starting in verse 13. I'm going to read 13 to 17. It says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. And I love this passage because of the way that it says there's a right way to be wise and there's a wrong way to be wise. The last 4 years at North River have been really, really hard in a lot of ways, and sometimes I failed and sometimes I succeeded. But I've learned the difference, especially going through diversity training and having conversations with the Knights. I've learned what works and what doesn't. My failures were rooted in bitterness, jealousy, and selfish ambition. And according to the scripture, that's demonic. I don't know about you, but that word is like, please don't define me by that, maybe. But in a lot of ways, the weapons that I fought with were demonic. And then I love the part that I really, really like in this passage. It says in verse 14, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambitions in your heart, do not boast about it or deny the truth. And I think when but what does boasting about it look like? At least for me, do not boast about it. What does that look like? When, the worship team would do a song a way that I didn't like. Oh, I hate when they sing a song. I'm boasting about what I don't like. I'm boasting about my differences. Or people who, might ask a question or say something that in my world isn't inappropriate. I'm like, oh, I can't get with people like that. Like, oh, people like that, I can't stand that. Or even something that I did, again, don't judge me, but I would really be intentional when I hung out with people from the path. I would be so intentional about posting it on Instagram so all my new white friends knew that I actually had friends. So I'd be like, look, I am love. I'm lovable. I'm cool. I have people to go get ice cream with. So when I was with people like me, I wanted other people to see, look, I don't need you because I have my people. I don't need you to want me because I have my people. And inside, I'm like, I need you to be my friend. I desperately need you to be my friend. So I'm boasting about the thing that separates me. I'm boasting and I'm proud of the thing that separates me. But it also says don't deny the truth. What does that look like? Oh, they said a hurtful comment. Oh, that didn't bother me. I'm fine. It's not that big of a deal. Well, I just don't feel like talking about it right now. Okay, that's fair. At some point, you got to talk about it, though. And so denying the truth is really avoiding it, not speaking about it. And so if it bothers me, I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen. I'll laugh it off, but I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to engage with it. And according to God, that method is demonic. I think it's really important to understand that we can't protect our own circles instead of opening them. And I feel like sometimes it can be this idea that Black people can't be racist. That's not true. I was being very prejudiced. I was being very just intentional about making sure that Instagram was my source of power. I want to make sure that the white girls that I feel hurt by know that I'm not really hurt. That's not true. And so I think it's important to understand it can go both ways. But my victories were rooted in humility and raw honesty, like right now. And so the Knights helped, a couple, and this is very recent. I think that's why it's so scary to talk about. I'm still trying to figure this all out. But the Knights a couple of months ago shared with me about, and challenged me really, about the value of being known. That when we become disciples and we say we love each other and we say we want to, Romans 12:5 says, if you're part of the body of Christ, you belong to each other. Ephesians 4:25 says, put off falsehood and speak truthfully to one another because you are members of one body. Yes. Like 1 Corinthians 12 says, when one part suffers, every part suffers. When one part rejoices, every part rejoices. Like there's no way I can defend my own. I only feel comfortable talking to these people, even though you're the part of the body too. I would be playing God, making a decision like that. And so they challenged me in the middle of whatever mall that was in the court. They were like, you need to be known. And in my mind, I'm like, what's the point in having these conversations? Afterwards, I'm still going to be Black, they're still going to be white. There's nothing's going to change. But they were like, you just need to be known. Nothing might ever change. But the fact that you need to be known, that still stands the case because they don't really know you. These people don't know you that you're hanging out with. So this year I've had some good talks. Had a great conversation with Bree. We had a good talk about it. Had a great conversation with Kirsty, talking about how I feel like, I'm very overly poised in staff meeting because I'm so scared to be too passionate and be the Black woman who has too many opinions. Because all of a sudden I'm sassy, and I'm like, I'm not sassy, I'm expressive. I use my shoulders, whatever. But so people that can be offensive, wow, you feel really passionate. Whatever. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times for the last 3 years in staff meetings, I wouldn't say anything, especially on topics that I had really deep convictions on. Because if I start talking about this, I'm going to go for it. And I don't know how to talk about this without going for it. So, hey, LaToya, what do you think? I think that's great. that's a lie, you know. And so, I mean, not that there were things that we disagreed on, but you know, you have those topics that you feel like, I'm really fired up about this passage or this theme or this whatever, and I wouldn't speak up because I knew when I get excited, I start being more Clayton County me, and I don't think I'm supposed to do that. I'm only supposed to be this me. And so I really had to fight for that. So if you relate to me in any way, whether it be, I know a lot of us can sometimes feel as the minority, again, the minority culture, not race, but a minority culture, because the dominant culture at North River is very like European. And so the way that we do music, the way that certain things are done in the church can feel like that's not what I'm used to growing up. If that's you, I really beg you, please talk about it. Don't deny the truth. Don't boast in it. Do not, but find people who agree with you and find people who feel the same way about that song and talk about how much you guys hate that song, how much you wish you could do this and wish you could do that. Talk to people about how it makes you feel. Talk to people about how it affects your faith. There used to be a song that every time we sang, I walked out. Don't do that. Like, that's arrogant and disrespectful to God, you know? And so I think, you know, if you relate to me in any way, I would say Ephesians 4:25 is my challenge to you, is just be honest. Be honest with people who are not like you. Be honest with people who are like you. But speak up. And it's really, really hard. It's really, really vulnerable. But God is requiring us to engage. And God is requiring us to love one another in a deeper way. And we can't do it if we're not being honest with each other. So that's kind of my part.
Tell us the other side.
I found out when Cody stepped out at like 7:10, decided that I stepped in. So have grace on it. I kind of wrote this all real quick, but so I actually didn't really think much about my past and my school experiences until I heard other people talking about it, and then it helped me to actually think about my prejudices that I had growing up. And some of the ones that came to mind, I grew up in Gwinnett County, which is actually pretty diverse. Harmsville High School was pretty half and half. I mean, we had a really good mix of all different minority races. And so, but I think when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, well, in middle school and in high school, the black guys were the ones that would hoot and holler at me. Or the black guys were the ones that would give me attention. Or the black guys were the ones that would whatever. And then I can think of like my neighbors that were getting their house painted, and it was maybe Hispanics, and I can remember walking past them and then like staring at me and whistling. And so I think I was just thinking that like that even fed into some of the things that I would think when some of these shootings would happen, or when some of these things I would see on the news. I'm like, oh yeah, because I've like felt that, or I understand that. And so I think that even fueled some of my prejudices that I'm still fighting today. And that's just being really raw and honest, and I hate that. But those are the things that I experienced. So I dated black guys, dated white guys, had black friends, had white friends. I never really thought that I was racist or any of those things growing up. And then when I became a disciple, one of the girls that helped me was mixed, to help me become a Christian was mixed. And I would say things, and she'd be like, "You're racist. You can't say that." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. Like, I'm not." We fought like probably 5 times, like actual fighting on "I'm not racist," and her being like, "You're racist." So it was actually cool. Over the last few months, I actually got to apologize in March, and I was just crying. So I was like, "I was racist. I was prejudiced. Like, I had all these things. You were right." So I think that this training that we've been going through as a staff has been really helpful for me. So the thing that kickstarted it was I think it was in January. I was at a D group with Muna and Tony, who are 2 black sisters. And at the very end of it, they were like, "Hey, can we talk to you about something? You know, we talked about being a diverse group of people, but we're not actually like diverse. Like we're not actually loving one another." And I was like, "I don't understand. What do you mean?" And I really didn't get it. And I just sat there, and I mean, in my mind, I'm like, I want to give up. Like, I don't understand what they're trying to tell me. Like, what do you want to do? So you want to have a lesson? What do you want to do? Like, and I just kept feeling like I needed to fix it. And after like 45 minutes, I kid you not, this was the end of D group. So we stayed another 45 minutes of me trying to understand, like, what do you mean? Like, I do love you. We do understand each other. We are like one body. Why don't you feel love? Like, you can talk to me. But I was like, okay, it's not about me. It's about a lot of other people too. And I think what hit me there was like, I was trying to fix it, and that's the whole point. Is like, we're not trying, they don't want us to fix anything. Like, nobody wants us to fix anything. They just want to be understood. And I think as disciples, that's the biggest thing, is we talk about loving one another. And I know a few people have mentioned it already, but we love, but loving is deeper than just like, oh, I love you. It's like, I do want to be able to hear what people are experiencing, right? I do want to be able to hear what people have gone through in their life, and I think the fact that minorities feel like they really have to stick with their culture to share experiences is what we're trying to break here. We really want to be able to hear other people's experiences and other things that people have walked through in life, and that was like, the scales fell off my eyes in that moment of understanding, like, they literally, like, minorities, people just want to be heard and shared with what they've experienced and what they've gone through that I will never understand. And I think some of the cop stuff that Jordan mentioned is stuff that I felt too, like, well, they were doing something wrong. You know, I can go to those things, and I think, honestly, as white people, we can go to those things. Like, well, they just shouldn't be doing it right. But I think what really hit me in the diversity training the first time was actually when Diane shared, as a little girl, that she had to, she heard that she has to work 3 times as hard. 3 times as hard as a white person. As a 4-year-old, as a 7-year-old, as a 10-year-old, and that literally broke my heart. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? Because of the color of your skin, you have to work just way harder than I will ever have to work because things are handed to me because of my skin color. And I think that that was like the biggest moment. I was like, wow, that I hadn't ever thought about that. And so I think that was the kind of cracking into, like, let me walk in the shoes of another person. Like, let me think about having to tell my child, if you get pulled over by a cop, you have to put, you don't move. Like, you don't do anything. And I will never have to have that conversation other than, hey, respect the cops. And like, it's that easy, but people will have to have different conversations that I will never have to have. And I think realizing that is what it's all about. Like, we just have to be able to understand that this is different between the 2 people and between the different minorities. Sorry, not 2 people, forgive me. I'm trying to talk about, you know, big minorities. So I think some of the one of the other things that was a big moment for me was I was in the car with these girls again, and I was sharing how I began to like overcompensate towards minorities or like towards Black people. So if I was walking past like a Black person, I'd like, be sure to smile and say hi, and like even if they're a stranger, like, or at work, I work at a hospital in Atlanta, and it's predominantly Black staff. I feel like it's probably 75% because of where we are, and I'd be like, oh, make sure that I don't know, I just was like overthinking everything. And slowly it started to make me feel like I was pitying Black people. So I was telling Muna and Tony, I was like, I don't know what to do because now I feel like I'm overcompensating, and then I'm like, oh, poor, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, I don't want to feel that either. So I was just like in this weird, like, what do I do? I don't know what I feel. I don't know how to act. And I think they were like, that's okay. You know, like, that's okay. And I think in that moment too, the girls started to talk again, and I was just thinking in my head again about putting myself in their shoes. And I think what I pictured was waking up in the morning, walking down the street, walking into IHOP, walking into the gas station in a different skin color. And that hit me of like, oh, I definitely wouldn't feel what I feel right now. Like, would I be afraid? Would I think, oh, this white manager is going to follow me around the whole time, or he's definitely got his eye on me as soon as I walk in the door, you know? And I think that those are real things that I think people feel. And I had never thought about that, and that broke me as well, like just realizing I don't have to face any of that. I walk around and not even think about myself, you know. And going to Ghana this summer gave me actually a little bit of kind of a little bit of a taste of the opposite, because there are no white people in Ghana. And for the first 3 days, I was like, I want to rip off my skin. I'm being treated differently. They're trying to charge me more. I can't even I can't blend in at all. Like, I am so white and no one is white, and this is miserable. And I was like so miserable the first 2 days. So I was like, wow, wonder if this is just a hint of even what it feels like to be different, to not be the dominant culture. And I think even in learning about the dominant culture, the White Awake book, White Awake, is a really great book. And that was super helpful for me to even kind of figure out, what do I do now with my feelings? Yeah, so this has just all been learning experience for me. I mean, even recently, I was talking to a sister. I was actually Jasmine Jackson, the same girl that LaToya was talking about, and I was asking her about, I worded something, and I said a colored sister instead of a sister of color, and she was like, that was a typo, right? And I was like, what did I do? What did I say? I have no idea what happened. And I just I called her because I was like, a text conversation is not going to be good, and I was really afraid. But I called her and I was like, what did I say? What did this communicate? Like, I did mean to say that, but I don't understand. And so she explained it to me, and I was like, okay, like, that makes sense. But so So I think with that, it's like you're gonna make errors. You're gonna say things that are gonna be really wrong. Like colorblind was another thing I said. That's not actually good to say. I thought it was a great thing to say. I was like, no, I don't see color. And like, you don't see that I'm different. It's like, no, that's not true. So I think that was a big takeaway. And then another one that hit home for me, actually, well, that hit home, but a few weeks ago, I don't know if Najee's in here, but Najee had to go to the hospital, and another black brother took him. And I was working that day at the hospital myself, and he went to a different hospital. And I didn't think about it until I was on my way home, and I was like, wow, I wonder if he was treated badly. Like, I wonder if they took him as some junky college kid who's probably just wants pain meds, or just like, or they're not going to treat him well because he probably doesn't have insurance, or, you know, like, I just was like, what were the assumptions that were made about my brother? And I was like, ready to go to the hospital and made sure that he got like right treatment, you know, but I think I was like, oh my gosh, and I was like, did he feel that? Like, was he afraid that he wasn't going to get good treatment? Because that's real too. YouTube it, look things up, like, people really face things, and I think that's been the hardest thing as a white person is when people talk about it, we don't want it to be a problem. Especially us in this room, we really don't want it to be a problem, and so we try to, no, we'll look at this situation, or, oh, no, well, what about this? And it's like, guys, just listen, because, like, these are real things, and these are real things that people feel. And so, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share. I think we're running out of time, too, but I think my takeaway points were just, like, don't be afraid to share your thoughts. Don't be afraid to share the prejudices. I mean, I had one the other day driving through Cody's parents' neighborhood. It's a really nice neighborhood with big old nice houses, and I think I saw the first black woman walk into her mailbox, and I was like, oh, you know, and I'm just being open. That was a thought that I had, and I don't know if I would have thought it 5 months ago before all this training started, but I was like, oh, dang, like, I wonder if she's the only black person in this neighborhood. Like, I don't know, but it's just opening my eyes to so much, and not to make me, like, feel weird or whatever. I think it's just, I feel like I'm so much more aware of it now, and I feel like it's making me want to go after conversations, and when I see somebody post a video, it's not making me want to just ignore it, but like, hey, what did that make you feel, or what do you feel with this thing that just happened? So, anyway, that's everything that I think I want to share.
Wow, guys, all of them shared, I think, some amazing things. And I was sitting back there just trying to, and if I talk a lot about it, I'm going to have to, like, lock it down here really quick. But, man, it's emotional, and it's okay for it to be emotional. It's okay for it to cut us. And they shared a lot. They shared some amazing things. I'll keep it short, but I had a D group with a couple brothers earlier this week, and we went, not this week.